Alright guys, welcome back, and in this tutorial what I want to do is I want to talk to you a little bit more about relative layout. So if you don't really understand what's going on with this relative layout or exactly how things are positioned, what we're going to be doing is I'm going to be adding another widget right above here, and it's going to make a lot more sense, and you guys are going to have a lot more control over the positioning of your widgets after this tutorial. So just like, actually let me do this. This might make a little more sense. So I'll say that we're making the same home screen as last time, where you have an email and a password and you click this to log in. However, I'm just going to be adding one as an example. So instead of click me Haas, I'll put like log in. So I don't want to just run that, but this button is eventually going to say log in. So now let me go ahead and add one of those inputs, which would be an area where the user could type something. So the first thing we need to do is import it. So import Android.widget, and it's called edit text. Alright, so actually let me do this. Alright, I'm going to take this button and cut this and put it right under here. Alright, so we have the layout created, and then we have the button created, and now these are the button's rules, and then all of the housekeeping is taken care of down there. So I think that's a little bit more organized. So now the first thing I want to do is just create that edit text field, and we'll say that, I don't know, it could be like for the username. So I'll put username input, even though it's technically called edit text. So edit text, I'll just name it username. That'll be easy to remember, and set it equal to, why do I always freaking type new edit text, and this. Holy sweet. Okay, so now we have that edit text field created. Now the next thing I want to do is this. Eventually, of course, whenever you make a real life application, you're going to have a bunch of widgets on your screen, a bunch of stuff. Now, a good thing to always do is to set an ID for each widget, so then you can reference each one. You can also do some other cool things if each widget has its own ID. So again, an ID is just a number to reference each one. So let's go ahead and add an ID to this button and also the username. So red button, and all you have to do, it's really easy, set ID and then pass in a value, and also do the same for username. Set ID, and we'll call this one 2. So the ID of red button is 1, and the username input, which is above it, that widget will be ID 2, and I'll show you guys what we do with that in just a second. But for now, remember I said, whenever you want to lay out something explicitly in a certain position, you need to give it these rules right here. So we already did it for the button, so now we have to do it for the username as well. So this is actually going to be really similar. So if you just copy these button details and paste it right below, then just change the variable button details to username details. And let me see who's texting me. Alright, it is my sister, and she's giving me gift suggestions for my mom, which I kind of need because it is Christmas in 5 days and I have absolutely no idea what to get her. She's actually very difficult to shop for. So, alright, where was I? Oh yeah, in the middle of a tutorial. Alright, so now we have rules, and these are basically the same exact things. We're pretty much just making a container right here called username details, and the container is the same size of whatever that input is. Simple enough. So now what I want to do is say, okay, I'm going to take that container, which is pretty much the input, and I'm going to position it right above this button. So how do we do that? Well, above these button details, let me add a give rules to position widgets. Alright, so the first thing we need to do is username details. We need to add a rule, And the first rule is going to be this. We're going to say that we want to position it above here. Where above? Well, we didn't get into those rules yet, but we do want to position it above. So relative layout dot above. So that takes it and it puts it above the button. Now, actually I lied. This doesn't put it above the button. This just says, okay, you want to position it above something. In the second parameter, that's where we put the button. So we say red button, and this is where the get ID comes in handy, because we need to pass an ID of a widget in here, which is going to be 1, and then it's going to say, okay, take this and position it above the thing with the ID 1. So position it above the button. So now our username input is sitting above that button. So the next thing we need to do is add another rule, and that is this. So it's going to be above the button, but we also want to take it and center it horizontally, so it's in the middle of the screen. And of course, horizontal means left and right, so now it's going to be above and in the center. But right now, if we just ran this, it would be sitting directly on top of it. And of course, you always have some space between the input and the button. So let me show you guys how to add a little margin or padding between those two. So the last rule we're going to add, ooh, my voice just cracked. I'm like freaking 27 years old. What's going on, Bucky? Alright, so set margins, and actually and here's another tip. If you ever highlight something and hold down Control and press Q, then it's going to pop up those details. So these details, I know you can't see them all, but alright. So it says give me 4 values: left, top, right, and bottom. So if you're used to web design, it starts on top, but remember in this, it starts on the left. Now, we only want to add some margins to the bottom, a little bit of spacing between the bottom of this and the button. So for everything else, the first 3, we can just pass in 0. And for the last one, we'll just pass in, I don't know, like 50. And if it looks too small, then we can always come back and add more. But again, that's all we're doing right here. So we created an input, we gave all of our widgets an ID, and then we're setting the rules on how we want to lay everything out right there. Now, of course, the last thing we need to do is actually take this and add it to our layout. So just like the button, Bucky's layout, add view, which means add widget, basically. And what we want to do is, I think we just named it username. Yep. So what we want to add is that widget, and the rules that we're going to be using are these rules right there. So now let me go ahead and run this and check it out. So there you go. As you can see, we now position that input relative to this button. We put it on top of it, and we added some padding, or technically margin it's called, below the input to give us a little bit of space. Now we have a problem here, and that's this is incredibly small. It looks like the user could fit about 1 character in there, and their username is probably going to be a little longer than that. So in the next couple tutorials, I'm going to be showing you guys some more cool things you can do and how to fix that problem as well. Alright guys, welcome to another tutorial, and in this video, as promised, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you guys how to change the width of this thing right here. And you're probably thinking, alright, so that's one property, probably 1 line of code. Why the heck do you need an entire tutorial to teach me this? Well, yes, the method to change the width of this input is indeed 1 line of code, but this is the problem that we have with that line. The method that we're eventually going to use, called setWidth, it only accepts a pixel value. Now remember, I told you guys that different pixels are different sizes on different devices. For example, you can have a big screen TV and a phone with the same number of pixels. So if we just added a pixel value in there, it's not going to be very uniform. It's going to show up different on everyone's device, and of course we don't want that. So what I'm going to show you guys how to do in this video, let me clean this up a little bit, is essentially take density independent pixels, those DPs or DIPs, and convert them to pixels. So in order to do that, we need to import two more libraries. The first one is import android.content.res. Added a dot there. Resources. Now the next one is import android.util.typed value. And I'll tell you guys exactly why we're importing both of these in a second. But for now, scroll down and right under your button details, right above you where you add everything to your layout, what we're going to do here is we're essentially going to say, okay, this is how many DIP or density independent pixels. Sometimes I call them device pixels, but they're the same thing. Don't let me confuse you. So we're going to convert those to a pixel value because, again, that set width method, it only accepts pixels, but we want to use DP. So the first thing we need to do is call resources and make a variable named R and set this equal to get resources. Now we're going to need this value in a second, but what get resources does is it essentially gets a bunch of information about your app. Now what we are interested in is the piece of information about the display or the screen, and it's a parameter for the next line of code, so if you don't understand this, you will in like 15 seconds. So now what we need to do is we need to essentially convert a DIP value to a pixel value, and this takes one line of code. So I'm going to store the answer in a variable called pixels and set this equal to, first we're going to call a method and we're going to typecast it to an int. So again, whatever we get back, we want to convert it to an integer value because pixels can only be integers, so that's what we're doing. So next we want to use this typed value dot apply dimensions, and add your semicolon right there because this is actually going to take three different parameters, and what this is essentially going to do is this is the method to convert DIP to pixels. So the first parameter that it takes is typed value. Might as well type this out. Why do I always write types? Typed value. Now after this, complex unit DIP. So again, the very first thing we're saying is this is the unit that we're trying to convert. So I know that it looks kind of weird right now, but we are trying to convert DIP, device independent pixels. So the next parameter, of course, it says, okay, how many of those do you want to convert? 200. And the last parameter that it takes, let me give myself a little more space right here, is essentially, okay, that's what you're trying to do. Now I need some information about the screen. So r dot get display metrics is the last parameter. So I know this looks really weird and really stupid, so yeah, let me talk you through it one last time. Actually, let me finish this code and then you guys might see what's going on. So if I write username dot set width, again, look at this. This set width method, it only accepts an integer value in pixels. So that's the reasoning why we had to typecast it and get pixels from DP. And of course, for here, we just pass in that value of pixels. So again, this line of code right here, what it does is it takes whatever value in DP or DIP and converts them to pixels, and once we have that pixel value, we can pass it in right there. So this value is actually going to change from device to device. However, the size of our display is going to be consistent across every device. So that is pretty sweet. So now let me just go ahead and run this and show you guys what's up. So there you have it. Our little edit text input form is now the same size on every single device. So I know it was kind of confusing, but hey, you're going to have to pretty much yell at the developers of Android instead of me, because right now that's how you do it. So for now, thank you guys for watching, and in the next tutorial we're going to be moving away from creating user interfaces in Java into something entirely different and actually a lot more interesting. So thank you guys for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time. Alright guys, welcome back to another video, and in this tutorial I want to start talking to you guys about grid layout. It's a very simple layout. It's a lot easier to understand than a relative layout, so that's what we're going to be doing. And also, I probably should mention, I started a brand new project and I chose blank activity, so do that as well. I didn't think I needed to walk you guys through it since, I don't know, I already did like 3 times. But anyways, brand new project, blank activity, choose any name that you want. And once it opens up, you should be looking at this screen right here. So the first thing I actually want to do is just get rid of this text view, because I want to start from scratch. So delete that. Now, a grid layout is pretty much exactly like you would think. If you hover over it, it says a layout that places its children or allows you to arrange widgets in a grid. Now, of course, a grid, just like a spreadsheet or anything, is made up of rows and columns. So it's really easy to start placing everything out, and probably any app that you make, it's going to use at least one grid layout. At least all the apps that I made, I always use grid layout. So the first thing we obviously need to do is take this grid layout and drag it on your screen and just put it in the top left right now. Looks good. Now another thing I want to do before we start adding any widgets to this layout is this. I only want this layout to fit to the size of whatever contents it has. So right now it's taking up our entire screen. So in order to pretty much just adapt to the size of whatever is inside it, what you can do is you can actually just go up to these buttons right here, and this one says set layout width to wrap content. So click that, and the vertical arrows sets the layout height to wrap content. So click each of those, and now your layout's height and width is pretty much 0, 0. So this way it's going to wrap to whatever stuff we put inside it, aka widgets. So let's add a couple buttons to it right now. So actually, if you go down to button right here and drag it over that dot, you're going to see row 0, column 0, and drop it in. So essentially every widget you add is going to have coordinates of a row and a column. Left and right's rows, top and down is column. So again, since we only have one thing in here, this is at coordinates 0, 0. So actually what I'm going to do is, if I have this button selected, go down to text and rename the text on this button to center and hit enter. So we'll say that, I don't know, maybe we're going to make a layout with 3 columns and 2 rows, and we want this button to be the center one. Well, let's go ahead and add another button to the right of this. So I'm going to go ahead, click on button again, and start dragging it, and as you can see, I can't place it here because there's already something here. I could place it to the left, and it says insert before column 0. What I want to do is place it to the right, and it says insert row 0, which is the first row, after column 0. So whenever I do that, it places it to the right, and therefore I'm going to name this one right. Hit enter and do the same thing with left. Real quick, drag this button and place it before column 0. So again, before you place it in, it gives you a little like hint of where you're going to drop it. I'm just going to name this one left and hit enter. So the first thing you probably noticed is that, okay, whenever I added a widget, I get these green bars right here, and these green bars, they actually just represent the entire row or the entire column. So if you do something like this, take another button and drag it under the left, so it says after row 0, column 0, which pretty much means the first column in the second row, then what you can do is, let me rename this to bottom, and hit enter and check it out. So again, you can actually select these green bars, and it's the same as selecting the entire row. So I can take this one right here, grab it with my mouse, and drag it above row 1 and they switch places. So again, that's what that does. And another cool thing that you can do is if you ever want to delete an entire row, what you can do is you can right click this and choose delete, and it deletes that entire row. So that's a cool little tip that's going to save you some time. But I didn't want to delete that, so I'm just going to hold down Control Z on my keyboard, and I got it back. So this is pretty cool right now, but one other thing that I want to do is show you guys how to take one of these widgets and have it span multiple cells. So say that I actually wanted this right button to take up this cell and the cell below it. So what I can do is actually select that right button, and if I scroll all the way up in the properties, then I'm gonna see some properties at the very top that say column span and row span. Now again, whenever you want to span something down, you need to span it across multiple rows. See what I'm saying? So for the row span, when I have that button selected, if I add something like 2 in here, watch what happens to these blue grid lines. Hit enter. So now this one cell is taking up 2 rows. So this row span is pretty much asking how many rows do you want to take up? Well, 2, good enough. Now we can actually do this with this bottom button. Say that we wanted this cell to take up 2 columns. So we go to column span and add 2 right here. So now we have one cell that's the width of 2 columns, but the problem that you guys already see is these widgets or these buttons, they don't just automatically expand to take up the contents of the cell. So how do we do that? Well, anytime you want to adjust the positioning or size of a button or a widget, you actually need to use the gravity property. Now select your widget and go down to layout gravity and expand this. So the first thing that we can do is if we want to take this button and center it in the middle of these cells, or the cell, I guess it's more technically is we can go to layout gravity center vertical. So that's going to take whatever contents are in it and center it vertically. Pretty sweet. But now if you're like, okay, that's nice, but I actually wanted to have that button fill the entire contents of the cell. Well, we can do that as well. Again, in your gravity property right here, if you go down, I guess you didn't need to go down, but if you go to fill vertical, then watch what happens whenever I click this. It expands vertically to fit or fill the entire contents of the cell. Now another cool thing that I should probably mention is whenever you fill this button to pretty much fill the vertical area, you actually don't need to center it anymore. So you can go to center and unset that. So centering a widget is only useful whenever the widget doesn't take up the entire area. Right now it would just be a waste. So again, fill vertical is going to fill the entire area vertically, and we can actually do the same thing for this. So right now this button is only taking up half the area. If we ever want to fill it to fit the entire area horizontally, you guys can probably guess what's going to happen. Fill horizontal. So there you go. So that's the real basics, can't talk today, of a grid layout. Again, you can adjust things or align them in rows and columns, and this is how you span across multiple cells and also take any widget and fill it to fit however many cells that you want. So for now, thank you guys for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, and for your challenge or your homework, this is what I want you guys to do. I want you guys to design the coolest layout using a grid layout, take a screenshot of it and post it on my forum. So even if it's not that great, then just go ahead and take a screenshot of it and post it on my forum. And well, once you completed that challenge, you are ready to move on to the next video. So thank you guys for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time. Alright guys, welcome back to another video, and in this tutorial, what we're going to be doing is we're going to start learning the basics of event handling. Now, up until this point, what we did is we just made a really simple app. We had some buttons and widgets on there. However, whenever you clicked them, nothing happened. So these are like the dumbest apps ever made, pretty useless. So what event handling is essentially how to make your app interactive. Whenever they do something like click a button, you can call an event and, I don't know, something occurs. So of course it would probably be pretty important during our app development process if we learn how to do this. So that's what I'm going to be teaching you guys in this tutorial, the very basics of how to make your app interactive so the user can interact with it. So what I'm going to do in this example is I'm just going to have one button, and then I'm going to have some text on there, and whenever the user clicks the button, the text is going to change. Pretty boring, but it'll be pretty easy to demonstrate what I'm trying to do. So, probably should mention this. I actually started a brand new project with a blank activity, and I named my project Smart Button, but you can name it anything you want, of course. So, the first thing I want to do is I'm going to open up this activity main layout, and I'm going to delete this text view right here. So highlight it and hit delete. And the reason I did that is because I just want to drag a large text right there because it's a little bit easier to see during the tutorial. And again, I need a button as well. So go ahead and take a button and drag it right in the middle. So again, eventually the user is going to click this button and it's going to change this text right here. Now, whenever we're learning event handling, of course, what this means is we're going to have to wait for the user to click the button and then change the text. So we need a reference to both of these objects right here. So we need to set an ID for both of these widgets. So you can do these in any order, but I'm going to go to my text view first and scroll down to ID, and right here it says text view, but that is kind of hard to remember and pretty generic, so I'm just going to name this Bucky's text and hit enter. Name it anything you want, but actually write this down or remember it because it's pretty important. And for my button, I'm going to change the ID to, you guessed it, Bucky's button. Hit enter. So now, again, once each of these widgets has an ID, we can reference them through our code. Now the only other thing I want to do before we hop into our Java file is actually take care of these little warning messages right here. And you guys already know what these are. It says treat your strings as a resource, so click this, click the arrow, and let's just give this string a name. So for the text, I'll just name it like message underscore text. Make sure you don't name this the same as your ID or else that'll get confusing. So that's for my string, and do the same thing for the button. Alright, so for the button string resource, I'll just name this like the button text. So this will be the text that's on the button, and hit OK. So now what I want to do is I want to change the default text for both this string right here and also the text that's on the button. Now what I can do is I can go here and show you guys that shortcut, but your file, that strings.xml file, is actually under app, resources, that's what RES stands for, values, strings.xml. So for the button, I'll just set something like, what can I put for the button, like click me Haas. So that's the text that's going to appear on the button. Now this right here is the default text, so it's the first thing that the user is going to see whenever they open their app. Now again, whenever they click the button, it's going to change, but by default I'll just write something like hello, since that's pretty creative, just hello. How boring is that? Now if you hop back over, you can see, okay, the default text of each changed appropriately. And actually, let me close out of this because we don't need it anymore. So now that we have our interface set up, let's go ahead and hop over to our Java file. And the first thing that we need to do is we need to import a few things. So since we're going to be essentially writing some code to tweak both of these things, what we need to do is we need to import Android.view, or excuse me, well, yeah, I guess I'll do it in this order. Android.view view, and remember, a view is basically any type of widget. So after this, we just need to import the packages for the button and the text view. So Android.widget.button and import Android.widget. And I just remembered something, text view. Now also, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and start my emulator. So that should be ready by the time you're done with this. And actually, let me just pause my screen recorder because I don't want, sometimes when I run my emulator, my screen recorder automatically gets stuck on that and my mouse won't move. So let me pause. Alright, so hopefully you guys can see my mouse moving right now. If not, and if I have to re-record this, then I'm going to uppercut my computer and then drop kick someone else's computer because it's really annoying when that happens. But anyways, alright. So we have everything set up. We imported all the stuff we need. Our interface is good to go. Now let me talk you guys through the basics of event handling. So like I said, event handling is essentially making something happen whenever the user interacts with one of these widgets, in this case clicking the button. So event handling kind of has two parts to it. The first thing that we need to do is we need to tell this button, okay button, you're not just a dumb button that's sitting on the screen anymore. You actually have to sit and wait for something to happen. And this is called adding an event listener. So adding an event listener means that your button is now going to listen for events, in this example a click. So once we added an event listener, it's going to be waiting for a click. Now the second part of event handling is, of course, after that click occurs, you need to make something happen, because even though it knows it got clicked, it would be pretty useless if nothing occurred. So the thing that happens is called a callback method. So again, event listener is basically waiting for a click, and the callback method is the code that happens, in this case changing the text on the screen. So really simple to understand, two parts, but it does take a bit of code. So the first thing I want you guys to do is go to your onCreate, and all of the code that we write is going to go right in here. Because remember, whenever we say okay button, you need to listen for something, it's a good idea to tell it that as soon as we create our activity, because we don't want to tell the button, to start waiting for something whenever we're about to close it. So we might as well set everything up as soon as we create that activity. So of course, the very first thing we need, you guys probably could have guessed it, is a reference to that button. Now remember, this button, or at least I named mine Bucky's button. So now let's go ahead and get a reference to it through code. So now we can just use button, and I'm just gonna name my variable the same thing as the ID, and I don't know, that's just a lot easier for me to understand, and there's no issues with that or anything. So I'm gonna name my variable in Java, or my object, Bucky's button, and what we need to do is we need to typecast this to button, and it's find view or find widget by ID, and the ID is resource.id, and then you just type the ID of it, which was Bucky's button, or whatever you named yours. If you named yours something different, then make sure to write that right there. So now we pretty much went to our interface, we got that reference to the button, and we now can treat it as an object. Pretty stinking sweet. Why do I always burp during my tutorial? Alright, so now of course what we need to do is we need to take that button and set up the event listener. We need to tell the button, hey dude, you gotta sit and wait for something to happen. So that's all we're saying, pretty easy. So Bucky's button, and on it we're going to call a method called set on, not long click listener, on click listener. Long click is something else. I'll show you guys that in the next tutorial if you want. So set on click listener, and inside here, again, let me clean this up. Alright, so this on click listener is saying, okay, this button is going to wait for someone to click it. Now inside here, what we're going to do is we're going to pass in that callback method, which pretty much means after someone clicked you, then do this. Now the thing is, we can't just throw the method in here directly. We need to stick it inside an interface, and this is just standard programming practices. An interface is really simple to set up. It's just a collection of methods, pretty much. And in order to make an interface, just write the word new button, and the interface is actually it just popped up. Oh, now it's not gonna. Oh, it's popping up. Oh yeah, there we go. Alright, so on click listener. Now after this, just add your brackets. Alright, now within here, again, this is where we have our callback method, and the method for whenever the button gets clicked, this is what we want to occur, is public void on click, and we have to pass it in view v. Alright, so again, what's going on here is this is our reference to the button. This is our event listener, pretty much saying, okay button, sit and wait for someone to click you, so it's a click listener. They have different types of listeners. And again, inside here is our callback method, and it needs to go in this thing called an interface, and that's just because, I don't know, it's just the rules of Java. So now within here we can actually type anything that we want to happen, but remember what I said I'm going to do is I'm going to change the text on this view right here. So the idea of it is Bucky's text, and again this is just going to take 2 lines of code. Text view, and I'm just going to name it Bucky's text and set it equal to the same thing we did up here, but we need to typecast it to a text view object first, and then we can just do find view by ID r.id.Bucky's text. That is the song I love singing. Should do the entire tutorial as a musical. Alright, so now that we have a reference to this, all we have to do is we need to call one last thing, set text. Now of course what this method does is it takes whatever bit of text you pass in, and I'm just going to pass in like good job Haas, and sets that as the widgets text. So now let's go ahead and run this bad boy and see if it works. And by the way, while we are waiting, I want to ask you guys this. I have to get a new phone in like the next week or two, and I don't know if I should get a Note 4 or a Nexus, like a Nexus 6. So Samsung Note 4, I looked at them today and they are freaking awesome, or a Nexus 6, which I kind of like because it has standard Android on it. So I don't know. Let me know what you guys think. So there we have it, the coolest app ever created. Alright, so hopefully when I click this, check this out. And it works. This app is gonna sell for $1 million. Alright, so one last time, what we did, 2-second tutorial, we created an interface, and the interface was awesome, and once we had that interface, we referenced both of these things so we could tweak them with our code, and we set up a listener on the button that said, hey button, dude, you're gonna listen for something to happen, and it's like, oh, what do I want to happen, Bucky? And I go, I tell you, button, this is what you want to happen when someone clicks you. So we click the button, and it did it, and that, my friend, is event handling. Alright guys, bonus tutorial, because in this video what I'm going to do is we're going to be adding a little bit of code onto the existing program, and I'm going to show you guys how to listen for multiple events or different events with the same widget. So of course a click isn't the only thing that we can do with this button. We can also hold it down, we could also fling it, we could drag our finger across it, we could do a bunch of different things to it. So in this example, I just showed you guys how to set up an on-click listener. Hey button, wait for someone to click you. But what if someone takes their finger and they just hold it down on the button? Well, that's not a click, but it is a different event. So anytime you want to listen for a different event, it's really easy, but there's some weird things as well that I'm going to talk you guys through. So go ahead and take that. Again, I probably should mention this. Make sure that you are outside your entire listener and directly underneath it, Bucky's button. What we want to do is we're going to set on long click listener. Now a long click is kind of just like it sounds, but again, a click is when you just press it with your finger real quick, a tap almost. So a click is a tap. Now a long click is whenever your finger is on that button for longer than a second. So it's essentially the same as holding it down. So again, tap, holding it down. Just think of it like that. It'll be a little bit easier to understand. Now for this, what we need to do is we need to make a new interface button. Again, this is on a long click listener. It's a little bit different than this one, so make sure that you don't get confused. Actually, if you ever get an error after you're done typing all your code, it's probably because you got on click listener and on long click listener mixed up. Whenever they're autofilling, they sometimes get confused. But anyways, just like before, public boolean on long click, and we'll just pass it to view v like before. Alright, so again, this is our on long click or holding down, and this is the response whenever we do that. This is how we want to handle it. So I'm actually just going to take this because this is the exact same, and instead of good job Haas, actually right here I'll keep that the same, and I'll write something stupid like holy carp, that was a long one. Alright, so that's pretty stupid. Now there's one other thing that we need to do, because look at this. Why are we getting this little red squiggly line missing a return statement? Well, that's weird because we didn't have a return statement up here. I mean, all we needed to do is say, okay, this is what we want to happen whenever the user clicks the button. So why do we need a return statement right here? Let's just go ahead and return true to make it happy, and I'll talk to you guys through why we need a return statement. Whenever we have an on long click that occurs on our button, we need to return true, and this is essentially telling Android, hey, I handled this click. The user did something, but we took care of it. Alright, now the reason that we need to do that, because if we didn't, then that event would be called not being consumed or not being handled. So if an event occurred and it doesn't get handled by this bit of code, then it passes it along to here. So again, if your finger is on the screen and it doesn't occur long enough for an on long click event to happen, then it's going to get passed on to the next listener, which is on click. However, whenever we return true, it says, okay, that finger on the screen event, it was actually a long click instead of a click. So hey, click listener, you can go back to sleep, listen for something else because we already took care of it. So now let me actually go ahead and run this. Alright, so here we are, and the first thing I'm going to do is just click this like normal. So I'm just going to tap it real quick, and of course whenever I do, as expected, the on click listener kicked in and it said good job Haas. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold down on my mouse and not release it, and whenever I do that, it says holy carp, that was a long one. So now I'm going to release. Pretty cool. And actually, if you click this again, then it goes back to good job Haas, because that listener still occurs. So click, hold down, holy carp, that was a long one. Again, what's happening is whenever we're holding down, it said, okay, some kind of event occurred, but okay, we took care of it right here, return true, so no need to check if it was anything else because that event was taken care of. Now for your homework assignment, the next challenge is type in this code exactly like I have, and what I want you to do is pass in return false right here. And whenever you click and hold down, write a forum response and tell me what happens in that case. And if you get it correct, you are ready to move on to the next video. But if you don't get it correct, then do not watch my next video. Goodbye. Alrighty, Haas, welcome back to another video. And now that you guys know how to handle simple touch events like a tap, what I want to do is I want to show you guys how to handle gestures. Now, a gesture is a special type of touch event. Now, there are a bunch of different types, but the ones I'm going to be showing you guys how to handle in this tutorial are something like scrolling. So, for example, when the user has their finger on the screen and they tap down and then they drag it up and let go. So that's a scroll. Maybe you're reading, I don't know, some article online. Another thing is a fling. And a fling is kind of like a scroll, but you put your finger down and you just fling it up and then you release your finger at the same time. And this is actually a common gesture whenever you have like a reading app and you have a bunch of pages. So flinging can be like turning a page. And there's some other ones as well. And one of the special ones actually is a double tap. And that needs its new interface or an entirely different interface, but I'm going to be showing you guys all of them. It's going to be real simple. So the first thing I did is I created a brand new project. I named it Swiper Diaper because I wanted to include the word swiper in it, because I'm going to be showing you guys the swipe. And I don't know, the diaper just kind of popped into my head, so here we are looking at a blank project with one activity, Swiper Diaper. So go ahead and delete this text view, boom, roasted, and drag out a large text right here. And I'm just going to give this a new ID of, what can I name UID? So many options. How about Bucky's massage? Bucky's message, there we go. Alright, so now we have this text right here that has the idea of Bucky's message, and just because it's annoying me, I'm just going to name this like Bucky's text. Alright, so essentially what we're going to do is we're going to be calling a bunch of different gestures, and I'm going to be showing you guys how to implement them. And for example, whenever we scroll, then I'll just change this text to scroll. And whenever we fling, I'll just change this text to fling. So again, this is the only interface we need, and the text is going to change depending on what gesture we do. Pretty boring app, but it's really useful for just demonstrating this example. So that's actually the only thing that we need to do for this pretty boring design. So now let's hop over to the Java class. Let me get myself all situated. And the first thing I want to do is this. We need to import a bunch of stuff, and after I import it, I'll explain why we are importing everything. So the first thing is import, and well, since we need a reference to that text view, we can just go ahead and import that now, and that's Android widget.textView, and I have a burp coming in like 10 seconds. Come on, just get out. Just get out, burp. Alright, staying down in there. Okay, now we need to import Android view and motion event. Now two other things. Import Android.view.gesture detector. That is a pretty cool name. Alright. Now import Android.support.v4. Oh, I thought it was going to film the entire thing for me. v4.view. Oh, it might. Oh, MG, that was pretty sweet. Wow. I wish there was a program where you could just type tab, tab, tab. Next thing you know, you had like a social networking app. But actually, that would be pretty dumb. So, I don't know. I'm just entertaining myself over here. Alright, so we imported all the crap we need. So why did we import all of that? Well, this is how you detect gestures. What you're going to need to do is you're going to need to implement a couple interfaces. Now, these interfaces have methods inside them that are pretty much responsible for detecting gestures. Now, you can implement them in a bunch of different ways, but we're just going to use the same class right here. So what we're going to do is implements, and the first one is gesture detector, dot on gesture listener. And I'm running out of space, so I'm just going to add a comma. And the other one we want is gesture detector on double tap listener. So again, these are two different interfaces that we're going to implement. And again, this one right here, this on gesture listener, this is for your common gestures like flinging and scrolling and a couple other ones as well. This on double tap listener, of course, you guys probably could have guessed, this is for listening for double taps. So that's what we're going to be doing right there. Now the first thing that I actually want to do is, before we start using these methods that we just implemented, I'm actually going to go above right here and I'm going to get a reference to this while I remember it. So since we're going to be using it in a bunch of different methods, that's why I just don't want to stick this variable in one of them, since I want to use it throughout a bunch of them. So private text view, and I'll just call this Bucky's message. That is what I called it, isn't it? Yep. Alright, now another thing that I probably should do right here is private gesture detector compat right there, and G gesture detector. Pretty good name. And again, you guys know that this variable is just going to be a reference for here, obviously, and this little gesture detector, again, that's the object from the class that pretty much is going to detect gestures, and I'll show you guys later on how to use that. But for now, since we implemented both of these interfaces, what we need to do is we actually need to use those methods. So actually, I'm going to stick those right after the onCreate, just because, I don't know, it just feels right. And I'm going to hit Alt Insert. Now I'm going to hit Implement Methods. So this is pretty much saying, okay, you implemented this interface on double tap listener, so these are the methods from there you have to implement or use, essentially. And on gesture listener, these are the methods that you're using from there. So as you can see, on scroll, on down, which pretty much means your fingers down, on fling, which pretty much means you like fling up like you're scrolling through something. So I'm just going to hit OK, and what's going to happen is it's going to automatically insert all of those for us. So again, that's our promise whenever we're implementing that we're going to use all of those methods, and now we fulfilled our promise, but it's still kind of boring because we didn't do anything with them yet. So the first thing I'm actually going to do is go up to my onCreate method and give myself a little bit of room. Now you need to add 3 lines of code to the onCreate method. The first one is, you guys probably could have guessed, that Bucky's message. You actually need to take care of it right here. So you guys remember how to do this. Don't really need to talk you guys through it. Find view by ID r.id.Bucky's message. So now we got a reference to the message. Now we can actually tweak it whenever we have a gesture. Now, another thing I want to do is pretty much just housekeeping stuff, but this gesture detector, remember that was the object. I'm going to set this equal to new gesture detector compat, and then I pass in this. So again, what this is an object from this class which pretty much allows us to detect gestures. Simple enough. So the last thing I want to do is set gesture detector, and I'm going to call a method on it called set double tap listener, or set on double tap listener. Now I'm going to pass in this, and what this is going to do is going to allow us to detect double taps as well. So it's kind of annoying that they probably have a good reason behind this, but they separated the basic gestures from the double tap ones. Why they did that, I'm not sure, but they did it, so that's why we have kind of redundant code from time to time. So now all I need to do is this, and this is actually really easy. So on each of those methods that we are implementing, I'm just going to call a quick little, just do this and copy and paste it a bunch of times, I guess. Alright, on single, actually I'm going to do this even lazier. Alright, so essentially what I'm going to do is on each gesture that we're overriding, I'm going to set a little message to change the text on the screen to whatever gesture just occurred. So just like this. And instead of going through all of these, actually you guys can do that. I'm going to pause my video because it's probably going to take like a minute or so, and you guys don't need to see me do the same exact thing like 10 different times. So 1 second. Alright guys, so what I did is I added the functionality to change the text on the screen every time a gesture occurs. Now another thing I want to mention, or by the way, I also added 2 little comments to the source code so you guys can tell when the gestures are beginning and when they're ending, and which is pretty much the default code that was there before. So if you guys are copying the source code from the forum and you see that, that's what they are. So once you have all of your messages set, we need to do a couple more things. The first thing is, you see how all of these return false by default? Well, we actually want to return true on all of those. And remember, the reasoning behind that is because return true essentially means that, okay, whenever this override method occurs, return true says the event was handled. The touch event was handled. If you don't have this return true, then what's going to happen is, for example, whenever you scroll, it's going to say on scroll on the screen, the text is indeed going to change, but the event, that touch event, isn't going to be consumed. In other words, it's going to say, okay, well, you still got to take care of this touch event. Whenever we return true, it says, okay, well, actually that's all we wanted to do, touch event taken care of. So it doesn't pass it along for something else to handle it. Alright guys, so the one last thing that we need to do is we need to override one last method, and this is going to kind of piece everything together. We need to go ahead and, I'm just going to stick this at the end of the gestures. Give yourself some space and hit Alt Insert, and then we are going to override a method, and make sure that you're sorting alphabetically. Actually, you don't need to do that, but it just saves some time. And actually, remember, this is our direct parent, our superclass. Fragment activity is its parent, so it's like our grandparent. Now activity, in here there's a method called where you at on touch event. So click on touch event and then hit OK, and then it says OK. So what you want to do is you want to override this method called onTouchEvent. Now onTouchEvent is the default functionality that gets called whenever a user touches the screen. Now by default, again, this is what occurs. It pretty much just checks for common touches. But what we want to do is we want to say, okay, actually I want you to detect if that touch was a gesture first, and if so, handle it appropriately, which we already did. So in order to do that, above this right here, type the keyword this dot gesture detector dot on touch event, and what we do is we actually just pass in that event that got passed in through here. So again, instead of just detecting whatever it was like normal, what it's going to do is it's going to take that touch event that gets passed in, the finger hits the screen, and it's first going to detect if it was a special type of gesture like a scroll or a fling or anything like that, and if not, then, you know, continue as you were. So now all we have to do is run this bad boy. Let me check and make sure I don't have any warnings, and let's see if it worked. Alright, so everything is looking good right now. Let me just go ahead and click down. And as you can see, the longer I click, at first it said on single tap, confirm, and if I hold it down, it says on long press. Now let me scroll up, and as you can see, no matter if it scrolls up or down, we get on scroll. And if I fling, for example, I'm clicking down, then when I get to the top, I'm letting go. Fling, 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 fling. Pretty stinking sweet. This app is awesome as always. The swiper diaper. The swiper diaper. Alright, enough of me singing. I should just like teach something for 2 minutes, then just sing for like 8 minutes. 10-minute video, pure gold. Alright guys, so now we know how to detect gestures. So your next homework assignment, if you can complete it, enough with these like little wimpy assignments. So this is your assignment for now. What I want you to do is I want you to create an interface and have some text, actually have some text at the top and have a button on the screen in the middle. Now I want you to be able to tap that button and have the text change to I got tapped or I just got tapped. That's better. And also I want you to have the ability to swipe on the side and that text changes that way as well. So again, text at the top, button changes it, and swiping changes it as well. And if you want to add, for bonus points, a nice subtle blue background, you can do that as well. But there you go, that is how you use gestures, and that is your next challenge. So let's see if you can complete it. When you do, post it on my forum. Thank you guys for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, and I will smell you suckers later. Alrighty guys, welcome back to another tutorial, and in this tutorial what I'm going to be doing is I want to start talking to you guys about something called fragments. Now a fragment is actually one of the most important parts of Android app development because what it is essentially it's part of your activity that you can reuse over and over and over again really easily. So say that you have this app and it has, I don't know, maybe 20 different activities, 20 different screens, and you want to create a menu for each one so the user can navigate around a little bit easier. Well, if you want to do that, then what you can do is go in each class and create all the code for the menu. OMG, this is going to take forever. Or what you can do is you can create this thing called a fragment, which is pretty much this bit of code that is reusable. So that way, once you have the fragment created, you can just stick it inside every class and you're good to go. And also the benefit of that is, say that, I don't know, maybe you wanted to change the color of that menu. Well, if you just did it the old-fashioned way, then you would say, okay, let me go back to every class and change the color of it. However, whenever you design a fragment, then what you can do is you can only change the color in one location, and then it's going to automatically update across all activities that you used it on. Pretty stinking sweet. So again, a fragment is pretty much part of your activity that's reusable. You can also have multiple fragments on the same activity. So for example, if you want to have a menu on every screen, and I don't know, maybe you're making like a social networking app and you want to allow the user to upload an image from a bunch of different activities, then you can have that fragment on there too. So just remember that you can have multiple fragments on any activity. And actually in this tutorial, what we're going to be doing is I'm going to be showing you guys how to make a really simple meme generator. So, I know I myself really hate memes because they're kind of annoying and they're all over the place. But for this example, it's really easy to demonstrate because I'm going to be having a single activity, one screen, and it's going to have two fragments on it. The top fragment is going to be where you type in the text and then click the button, and the bottom fragment is pretty much going to be the meme. So it's going to be a picture and then it's going to have the white text on it. So again, the top fragment is where you type it in, the bottom fragment is going to be the picture or the meme. So, okay, that was a lot of explaining, so now let's go ahead and get started. So the very first thing we need for a meme generator is, of course, some picture to memeify. So in order to be able to add pictures to your application, go over here to Android and choose Project View right here. Now expand this. Oh, by the way, I probably should mention, I created a brand new project and I just chose blank activity. So that's where I'm at right here. So this is a brand new project. As you guys can see, I named it meme creator, but name it whatever you want. So once you're here, again, go to project view and expand this and expand app. Now inside source right here, you're going to see a folder called main. So expand that and also expand this res folder. So let me show you guys. Alright, so inside here we're going to see a bunch of different folders, and the one we're just worried about right here is drawable. So for now, I know I didn't really talk to you guys about adding images to your app, but we can add an image in here, and that way we can use images in our app. So again, I'll talk about this all in detail later on. Again, this is a fragment tutorial. I just want to, have a picture in there real quick. And someone's texting me for some reason. I think people like wait outside my house and they look in my windows to see when I'm making a tutorial, and then everyone just starts texting me. That's what it seems like. But of course, for your image, what you can do is you can actually just go online and get any square picture that you want. But I'm using one from my website. It's my profile picture. I'll show you guys what it is. So there it is. If you want this, actually if you click the link below, it says my profile, then it has a link to it in the YouTube description. Then you can just download this as well. But anyways, once you have any square image, then take it and drag it in to that drawable folder, and let's say, okay, do you want to move this file into your project? Okay, I indeed do. And it says, okay, these files do not belong to the project. The heck they don't. Well, they do now, sucker. Okay, and check it out. So I now have that Bucky image or square image in my drawable folder. So once I have that taken care of, I can switch back to Android and of course check it out. So let me just position this a little bit better. Alright, there we go. Alright, so now let's go ahead and create our very first fragment, and for this I'm just going to have the fragment that we're going to eventually put on the top of main activity, and that of course is two inputs, one for the user to type in the top text and one for them to type in the bottom text, and a button. And whenever they click that button, it's going to add that text to the top of the image. So of course it's like going to memify it. So in order to create a fragment, what you need to do is you need to have two parts. The first part is the layout, how the fragment's going to look, and the second part is the Java file, pretty much the brains behind your fragment. So again, even though every single fragment is indeed going to consist of an XML file and a Java class, remember that they're pretty much set up the same way, but you can't just have a fragment standing alone. It needs to be part of an activity. So that's the main difference between an activity and a fragment. You can have just an activity, but whenever you create a fragment, it needs to be part of an activity. So remember that, it's actually pretty important. So anyways, in order to create a fragment, this is what you do. The first thing I'm going to do is actually just create the XML file. So if you go to your layout right here and you right click it and choose new layout resource file, this is pretty much just saying create a new XML file. So I'm going to say okay, click that, and what do you want your layout or XML file to be named? I'm just going to name mine top section fragment. Now another thing I want to do is I actually want to change this root element to relative layout. So I'll show you guys what this does right now. So click OK, and if we switch to text view, we can see that it pretty much just created a blank XML file using relative layout instead of, I forgot what was it by default, linear layout, I think. Alright, so of course this looks like an activity right here, but of course we know that it's a fragment. It's part of an activity that we're eventually going to be adding to something else. So let's go ahead and get creating it right now. So again, I'll create the first input first, and that is edit text, and as you can see it already fills in a couple attributes for us. So for the layout width, I just want to use wrap content, and also the same for the layout height. And the very first attribute I want to add above all of this is actually Android ID, and for this ID I'm just going to call it what can I name this? Something like top text input. Alright, so now we have a very basic input form. So now let's add some other properties just to make sure it's laid out properly. Alright, so it's in the top left corner right now, so if I change Android, oh look at that, layout center horizontal, it already knows what I want to do. Sweet. And change it to true, then it's going to position it in the middle of the screen. Now another thing I want to do is I kind of want to bump it down a bit because I don't want it touching the very top, as you guys can see it is. So Android layout, actually see if I can find it, layout underscore margin top, and for this I'll just move it down like 15 dp. That should be good. Alright, looks pretty good. Now of course the last thing I need to do is, if I want to allow the user to type any text in at all, I probably should make it a little bit wider. So Android width, and I'm just going to change this to 300 dp. Alright, that looks pretty good. So this is for the top, and of course the bottom one's going to be really similar, so we can just copy this and paste it right in there. Now of course the first thing we need to do is we need to give it a new ID, and I'm just going to call this bottom text input, and let's see, the width is the same, the height's the same. One thing I want to do is this. If I do Android layout below, then I can say position this below another item. Well, what item? Well, the only other one we have is this. So position it below top text input, which is right here. Now for everything else, just center horizontal. Margin top means how far do you want to put it below this one right here. So 15 dp is fine. And for the width, of course, the same width. Make sure everything looks real nice and neat. So after this, the one last piece we need for the top fragment is that button. So the button, of course, I'm just going to have this wrap content and wrap content, and of course it's in the top left right now, which looks really bad. But before we start positioning anything, what I want to do is put Android ID, and for the ID, what ID can I give this? A button. That's pretty creative, eh? Alright, so now we have an ID. Now we can identify it whenever we need to. And actually, why are my freaking line numbers shown by default? Makes me so angry. Alright, so what do we have to do now? Probably add some text to it. Would be nice. So Android text. What text do we want to appear? We'll just say like dank meme, bro. Alright, that button is looking sweet. And I want to add the margin top, and I'm too lazy to type it, so I'm just going to copy. And we probably should lay this out below here. So lay it out below there. Actually, I want to lay it out below the bottom one. Alright, so it's laid out right there, and also center horizontal. Alright, so looking pretty good. Is there anything else I need to do? The layout looks pretty sweet, but I do know that there's one other thing that's going to annoy me. So go over in your design view. Alright, now click the button, and of course that string we typed in, dank meme bro, it's yelling at us because we don't treat it as a string resource, and just name this something like button text and click OK. So now that string, it's now a resource, and alright, we don't got any warnings or anything like that. So now that our fragment is designed, what we need to do next is add the Java class to it. The second part that you need for every single fragment the brains behind the beauty. So that's what we're going to be doing in the next tutorial, so I will see you guys then. Alrighty guys, so once you have the design of your top fragment done and set, what we need to do is we need to add the brains behind it. Of course, for every fragment it needs a layout, which we just did, and the Java class. So in your Java folder, right here, go to your package that holds your main activity, and we want to add a new class. So right click your package, new Java class. Now for the name of this, I'm going to name mine top section fragment. Looking good, hit OK and check it out. And actually what I like to do is I like to arrange all my Java files on the left and all of my activity or layouts on the right. Alright, so this is a file that I just created, and of course I don't need that stupid comment, but what we actually do need to do is we need to import some stuff. So import.android.os.bundle, import android.support.v4.app.fragment, and I'll explain all these as we need them in a bit. But import android.view.layout.inflator. Two more ones real quick. Import android view.view and import android view dot view dot actually I missed it. View group, there it was. Now there are some rules that we have to follow to create a really basic fragment. The very first rule is we always need to extend fragment. So we always need to inherit from this fragment class, and that just tells our app, hey, this thing that we created is actually a fragment. Alright, so another thing that we need to do is we need to override on create view. So if you hit Alt, Insert, Override Methods, make sure this is sorted. Alright, on create view, hit OK. Now of course what this does is it says okay, so we know that this is a fragment. However, whenever you use it in one of your activities, what does this fragment look like? What pretty much layout are you using? So you can actually get rid of this because we don't need any of that. So essentially what we need to say is we're going to be using this XML file. That's all we're going to say. So in order to do that, we're just going to store it in view, and it's a little bit different to tell your app that you're using one of these layouts for a fragment. What you need to do is you actually need to use inflator.inflate, and again this is just a method to say this is what layout we're using for this fragment. Why they named it inflate, I don't know, it's kind of a weird name, but that's what we're doing. So we're using r.layout. What is my name? Top section fragment, which is pretty much a reference to this file right here. And just some housekeeping stuff, you need to pass it in container, and this is just a view group object that got passed in. We're just passing it through, and not false. Come on, jeez Louise. Alright, so after this we just turn view, which is pretty much essentially a reference to this. That's all we're doing. So again, those are the rules whenever you create a class that uses a fragment. First, it needs to inherit from fragment, and second, it needs to override on create view. Alright, so we have one fragment created, one part of our app. So the only other thing we have to do, well, it's not the only other thing, but what we're going to do next is we're going to create that bottom half, which is the good part, the picture, which we're going to memify. So let's go ahead and first make the layout for it, and this is actually really easy, a lot easier than this. So right click a layout and click a new layout resource file, and for the bottom fragment I'm just going to name mine bottom underscore picture underscore fragment, and I also want to change this to relative layout as well, and hit OK. So now let's actually do this through the designer, because I don't know, we really don't need to change that many properties on it. So the very first thing that I want to do is I actually want to say, okay, we're using that one image of me, of Bucky. So on the entire relative layout, what we can do is we can actually go to background property, and if you click these dots, it lets you browse your resources, and they're actually under here. So you can collapse color. Now in drawable, remember that's where we stuck it, and mine is named Bucky, so I'm just going to click that. So this is a reference to this image, and hit OK. And now the background of this fragment is me right there. Now I know it looks stretched out right here, but it doesn't really matter, because this is what's going to happen. Remember, this entire thing, it isn't the screen that the user is going to look at, it's only part of the screen. So whenever we take these fragments and we stick them on the main activity, what we can do is we can say, okay, for this fragment right here, make it square. So we can give it a fixed height and width. So even though it looks stretched out right now, it's going to look fine whenever we actually place it on our activity. So that looks pretty good. Now the only other thing that we need to put on here is 2 text fields. So let's go ahead and drag one right on top middle, and drag another one on the bottom. Alright, so the first thing I want to do is select that top one, and we need to start changing some properties. So the first thing, of course, is the text color for both of these is white, and the hex is FFF, and we might as well do the same thing for the bottom, FFF, enter. Alright, so now both for our text fields are white. Now another thing I want to do is I actually want to change the width of these. So you see how the size of this text field is pretty much matches whatever text is inside. Well, that's kind of annoying me, even though it really won't be a problem. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the layout width for this text to match parent. So I'm going to put match parent, and as you can see, now we can have the text field pretty much span the entire fragment. We're going to do that for both. Layout width, match parent, and of course the only other problem we get for this is now it's on the left. And of course, if you like, I don't know, having your text on the left, you can leave it that way. But typically, meme text is right in the center. So I'm going to switch back to that first one. I'm going to set gravity to center horizontal, and center horizontal as well. Now, what I actually want to do is, again, for this app, what's going to happen is the user is going to type in their own text, and it's going to pretty much set this text to whatever they typed in. But I just want to change the default text of it, because large text looks kind of weird. So for the default text, I'm just going to name this one like top text, and this one bottom text. Actually, let's just name it top and bottom. The user, of course, knows that it is text already. Alright, simple enough. So, of course, just so I don't have to look at these stupid little warnings, change this extract string resource, and for the top, I'm just going to call this one top text, even though we never actually use these through our Java code at least. And for the bottom one, where you at, light bulb? There you are. And we will just call the bottom text bottom underscore text and hit OK. So again, I know it looks kind of weird right now, kind of stretched out and kind of goofy looking. However, whenever we take this fragment and add it to our activity and everything is said and done, it's actually going to look really nice. So for now, the only other thing we have to do is remember, there's 2 parts to every fragment: the design of it, which we took care of already, and the Java file, the class. Alright, so creating the class for this is going to take like 2.5 seconds. So right click the package, just like you created the class for the other one, new, Java class. Of course, I'm going to name this class bottom picture fragment. Alright, it looks good. And now what we can actually do instead of typing everything again is just go to, actually let me arrange this a little bit better. Alright, so go to all that stuff we typed out in, I don't know, like 2 tutorials ago or whatever, and paste in all of those imports. And again, remember I said the 2 rules that we have to follow is we first need to inherit from that fragment class, so extends fragment, and the second rule was we need to override on create view. And we already typed all this code, so no need to type it again. Alright, so the one thing that we actually do have to change is this. Remember, on create view is where we tell it what design or what XML file we're using. So right now we're saying, okay, we want to use the top section for this and the top section for this. Well, for that new fragment that we just created, we actually want to use the bottom picture. So if you go to this little bit of code, you can type bottom picture fragment. So now you have 2 fragment classes. The first one is made to use this, and the bottom one is using this. So now we have 2 fragments created perfectly. The only other thing we have to do now is add these fragments to the activity. So go to your activity main XML file, and first of all, delete this stupid default text view. I wish they didn't even include that. But to add a fragment to your main activities design, what you do is you scroll down all the way at the bottom, and under the custom folder you're going to see this little thing called fragment. So this means, okay, we want to add a fragment to this design, and of course this is your main activity, your main screen. So click this, and let's just go ahead and add the top one first. So click top section fragment, which is that fragment we just created, and hit OK. So from here it says, where do you want to place that fragment? Well, let's just go ahead and plop it in the very top center. And now it says, okay, you have a little issue. I don't know what I want your fragment to look like, and I really don't know why this pops up. I think it's going to be fixed in the future tutorials, but if you just click this right here, it says use this one, then it says, okay, that's what I'm using, that's what, I don't know, this fragment's going to look like. So now, once we have that taken care of, the only other thing we have to do is add that bottom fragment, this one right here. So go back to your activity main layout and pretty much do the same exact thing. So click fragment, choose bottom picture fragment, choose OK, and stick it in the bottom center. Now it says OK, I don't know what your layout's supposed to look like, just click this link, and it says use that XML file, and sweet. Now I told you guys that since this is actually a fragment and not an entire activity, what we can do is we can change the size of this. So highlight fragment 2, which is that bottom fragment, and if you go to layout, actually you can change both of these. So layout width right now is wrap content, which means however big your contents are, just fit it to that size. But what we actually want to do is we want to give it a fixed height and width, and we want to make it square. So I'm just going to type like 275 dp and hit enter. So that's the width, and actually let me just copy that. Now for the height, 275 dp, since I want this to be square, and hit enter again. Now since it's positioned at the bottom center, that's where it's going to reside. And actually that's kind of small, and I have a little bit of space, so I'm going to change this to 300. Actually, let me change the height first. Can we go bigger? I think we can go 320. 320. Can you do it without... Oh yeah. Looking sweet, looking sweet. Oh my god, I feel like I want to eat. Now drop the beat. Alright, so that is pretty much how we arrange our main activity. So right now, again, this entire thing is our main activity, but it's consisting of 2 different fragments. the top section fragment and the bottom picture fragment. Pretty sweet. Alright guys, now that we are finally done designing everything, what we can do is we can start adding the brains to our program. Now, before we get started with any of that, you guys need to follow these rules. First rule of Fragment Club. Fragments do not talk directly to one another. Second rule of Fragment Club. Fragments do not talk directly to one another. Okay, you got that? These fragments are never going to communicate directly to one another. So what's going to happen is, since we need to take this text that the user types in and apply it to this fragment, they need some sort of medium, someone to go through, and that medium is the main activity. So what's going to happen whenever the user types in text and presses this button is it's going to say, hey yo, activity. The user just clicked my button, and the activity is going to say, okay, let me get that text. Cool, got it. Hey yo, yeah, I'm activity. Yeah, bottom fragment, I'm going to need you to change your text to whatever I tell you to. So that's pretty much what's going to happen. This fragment, or this button rather, is going to wait to be clicked, and when it gets clicked, it's going to tell the activity about it, and then the activity is going to tell this fragment about it. So again, remember those rules. Fragments are never ever allowed to talk directly to one another. Sweet. So let's go ahead and first set up the listener for this button click. So in top section fragment right there, let's go ahead and import three more things. Of course, we need to import android.app.activity, and this is just so it can talk to that main activity. Now the next thing we need to do is just import android.widget.button, because remember, it has a button right there, and we also need to import the package for these edit text fields because it has edit text fields. Simple stuff. So import android.widget.edit text. Alright, looking good. So of course, before we actually start adding the brains to anything, we just need to get a reference to all of this stuff. So top text input, bottom text input, and the button. So I'm going to make a private variable static edit text, and that first one, actually let me name my variables the same. Alright, so top text input and bottom text input. So top text input, and I'm just going to copy this because I am lazy, and bottom text input. Alright, pretty sweet, very nice, very nice. Alright, so now on create view, and the reason that I'm going to stick it in here is because this gets called as soon as pretty much this view is created, as soon as this fragment is created. So of course that's when I'm going to assign all the variables, because you know it's like the perfect time to. So for this top text input, just set this equal to, we're going to cast it into an edit text. Again, we've done this like a million times by now. View find by ID, and the ID of this is r.id.top text input, and it's probably just faster if I just edit text view find by ID r.id.bottom text input. Where are you at? There you are. And the last thing we need to do is actually get a reference to that button. So button, I'll just name it, what did I name it? I think I just named it button. Alright, so this equals, of course, it's going to be typecasted into a button. View dot find by ID r dot button button. Alright, so now we got a reference to everything. Pretty boring, nothing really to explain there. Alright, so what we need to do now is we need to set up a listener on that button. So this button is pretty much just going to be chilling there waiting for something to happen. So for button, let me add my stupid lines again. And I actually want to give myself a little bit more room. I like when I can like scroll around for some reason. And let me make sure you guys can see that source code in case you are copying it. So button, what I'm going to do is I'm going to set on click listener. And again, we did this in the last couple of tutorials. So what we need to do is we need to put new view dot on click listener. And the only method that we need to have here is public void on click, and pass in that view. Alright, so inside this method is essentially where we write what do we want to happen when the button gets clicked. Well, instead of jamming up inside here with a bunch of code, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new method called button clicked, and I'm just going to pass through that view v. So that way, if we go outside this onCreate view, then I can make public void button clicked, and of course it takes that view parameter that we just passed through. So essentially any code that gets called whenever this button gets clicked, I can just type in here and it's a little bit neater. Let me just tighten that up for now because we're actually going to be filling this in just a bit. Alright guys, welcome back to another video, and in this tutorial what I'm going to be doing is I'm essentially going to be gluing together this top fragment with this main activity. So I'm going to be showing you guys how to communicate. That was kind of cute little burp there. Alright, I always try to compliment my burps as best I can. Alright, so what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be showing you guys how to successfully communicate between this top fragment and the main activity. And again, it may look a little bit weird whenever I'm doing it, but I promise by the end of this tutorial, once you see how everything is put together, it's going to make sense. So again, if you're watching this tutorial, don't give up halfway through, because at the end it's going to make a lot of sense. So the first thing we're going to do is we actually are going to create an interface, and you'll understand why later. So I'm just going to name my top section listener. Activity commander is the name of the interface object. And of course, since we said, okay, we're going to create an interface named top section listener, let's go ahead and do that right now. So public interface top section listener, and of course what we need to do is we need to say, okay, this interface that's going to be implemented by main activity, you're going to implement it to ensure that you have some function, or excuse me, I'm used to programming PHP. I've been working on my site, so that's why I may call some things functions, but it ensures that you have this method implemented. So this method that we want to make sure that main activity implements is create meme. Now for create meme, whenever main activity is trying to create meme, and again this is just a method that we're going to be making later, but we're going to pass it in two strings, the top and the bottom. So again, what's going to happen is this main activity is going to implement this interface, and whenever it does, it says, okay, I promise that I'm gonna use this method called create meme, and what create meme essentially is going to do is we're going to pass it in the text from here and the text from here, and then it's going to use that to create the bottom meme. Alright, so what we have to do after this is actually have an override method, and the override method is on attach, and hit OK. So what on attach does is it gets called whenever we attach the fragment to the activity. So whenever that happens, what code do we want to stick in here? Well, all we want to have is we want to say, okay, try that activity commander and set this equal to top section listener activity. And let me just finish this up and then I'll explain what I'm doing. So after this, what I want to do is just catch class exception. I'll just call it E. And if I catch that, hopefully I won't, throw new class cast exception activity, and I'll just have toString. So we have something nice to look at, or hopefully we don't look at it. Alright, so actually I might as well just finish up all this code and then I'll talk you guys through it. So on button clicked, and I added a little comment so you guys know what's going on. So this eventually gets called whenever the user clicks the button. Remember, we just stuck it down here to make it nice and neat. And inside here, for that activity commander thing, which what the heck is that? You're going to call create meme, and remember, create meme is pretty much how we communicate to this main activity. So whenever we're communicating with it, we're going to give it 2 pieces of data to pass along to bottom picture fragment. And those 2 pieces of data are the text that the user typed in here and in here. So how do we get that text? Well, the 2 parameters are top text input, and to get the text from edit text, it's just a method get text and convert it to a string, which pretty much means just the text itself. So the first parameter is the top text that they typed in, and the second parameter is the bottom text. So same exact thing essentially. So toString. Alright, so let's go ahead and step back and essentially see what the heck just happened. So what's going to happen is we're saying whenever you want to talk to top section fragment, in order to do that you need to implement this interface right here. So later on we're going to implement it from main activity. Now whenever we implement this interface that we just created, what main activity is doing is it's saying, okay, I implemented it, so I promise that I'm going to create this method called create meme. Now we need to ensure that this method gets created, because if we're trying to talk to main activity and pass along that information and they don't have a method called create meme, well, that's going to cause a whole bunch of trouble. So saying, okay, whenever I attach this fragment on main activity, then I'm going to create that interface, which we just did. Actually, right here is where we created it. And then since I created this, I'm going to include this method, and eventually whenever they click the button, they're going to go to main activity and call the create meme method with these 2 pieces of information. So I know it's kind of weird, but that is how top section and main activity talk to one another. And if you made it through this tutorial, I promise everything else is actually really easy. So that was the hardest part. So if you don't understand, then, well, you probably will by the end of this tutorial. It's probably going to be like 2 more videos, maybe even 1. So for now, thank you guys for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time. Alrighty guys, so the hard part is over. Now let's just go ahead and do the easy stuff. So in my main activity, what we're going to be doing is, remember, implements and top section fragment dot top section listener. Sweet. So again, I already explained what all that does, and our promise that we made to top section fragment is, okay, I promised that I was gonna have this create meme that you can talk to. So let's go ahead and hit Alt Insert and implement that method create meme. And actually, let me add a little comment right here. So I'll put this gets called by the top fragment when the user clicks the button. So now you know when this gets called. There you go. Now before we actually start adding any code to here, and this is actually really simple, it takes like 2 lines of code, what we need to do is we need to have a method in this bottom picture fragment. And all this method is going to do is, let me just go to my activity main. So this is actually going to be really easy. It's not even any weird communication stuff. It's just normal Java. We're just going to get a reference to both of these text elements, and then we're going to set the text of them to whatever gets passed in. Simple, easy, wheezy stuff. Alright, so under view group, of course, we need to import one thing, android.widget.textView. And both of those things are text view, so that's why we only need to import one thing. Now, of course, we need to reference both of them, so static text view, and I don't think I actually, so it's in bottom picture. Alright, text view. Alright, so I didn't give them an ID. Should I? Yeah, I probably should. Alright, so where are you at? Alright. So for the top text view, let's just go ahead and give it an ID of, instead of text view, I'll just put top meme text, and for the bottom one, I'll give it a text view of bottom meme text. Alright, so now they have IDs that are a little more proper. So private static text view, top meme text, and private static text view, bottom meme text. By the way, it's Christmas Eve, so happy Christmas Eve. Or, I don't know, you gotta say happy Merry Christmas Eve? I don't know what you say. Just never mind. You know what? Just forget about it. Alright, so now that we have variables that can actually accept a reference, let's go ahead and create those references right now. So top meme text, we already know how to do this. Cast that bad boy to a text view, and view dot find by ID r dot id dot la la la, where you at, top text. That's actually not it. Top meme text. Now for bottom meme text, set this equal to view dot find r dot id dot bottom meme text. So again, both of these variables right here reference this bit of text and this bit of text. Easy enough. So now the only other thing we have to do is we need to create one last method, public void set meme text. Now what this is going to do is it's going to take two parameters, string top and string bottom, and it's going to set these text fields equal to whatever we pass in. So top meme text set text equal to top, and what was our other one? Bottom meme text set text equal to whatever we passed in for the bottom. And that is actually all we have to do. So again, just to recap one last time, we imported this so we could actually use those things. And once we did, we could create a reference to that top and bottom text. And why did we need a reference to them? Well, since we can then programmatically change the text of both of those widgets. So thank you guys for watching, and in the next tutorial we're going to be finishing this up and running it, and hopefully it'll work. So the only thing we have to do is, of course, 2 lines of code. Probably going to be the easiest tutorial in the world. Get a reference to that bottom fragment, and of course call set meme text on it. So let's go ahead and get a reference first. So bottom picture fragment, I'll just name it bottom fragment, and you set it equal to, and this is a lot like getting a reference to any other widget. It just is a little bit weird because it's a fragment. So bottom picture fragment, of course, and the method is get support fragment manager, and then you need to find fragment by ID, and of course, since it's a resource ID, and fragment 2, I believe it was. Alright, so the fragment Regular is the top one and fragment 2 is the bottom one. So now that we have a reference to that bottom fragment, what we can do is we can actually bottom fragment, and that was set meme text. Now we just have to pass in top and bottom, which is what the user typed in. It's now getting passed along to that bottom fragment, and hopefully, if everything works, it should take the text from here, pass it to the activity, and what method we just wrote, it will change the text on there. So let's just go ahead and run this. Now let's just type something like S2 wear glasses, can't see sharp, and let's thinkify this meme. So sweet. There you go, looking good. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is how you create the world's worst meme app.